Welcome to another edition of Trail Runner Nation. My name is Don Freeman.
And I'm Scott Warr. Hey, Don, we were thinking about this the other day. What percentage of a 50-mile race, even a marathon or a 100-mile race, do people actually walk, do you think? What percentage?
Well, we don't want to call it walking. We want to call it efficient travel, a strategy. And I'm going to say there's a good 20% of that race if it's flat, and maybe up to 40% if it's very hilly. So those are my numbers.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more.
What do you think?
I think that I would agree with you. I think there's a lot more power hiking when I go out for a run, for sure. But by mastering those walking techniques, you can significantly increase your endurance, your performance, and your long distance running events. Today, we're joined by Mark Sisson. He's a renowned fitness expert and seasoned endurance athlete to help us understand how to optimize our stride, our pace, our posture that can be game changers in our training and in our racing. So, Mark, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, guys. Well, I'm excited about what we're going to talk about today.
Well, I am too. We had the great opportunity to bump into you at the running event in Austin, Texas this year, and we came across. Actually, we were wearing a pair of Peluvas, your wonderful shoes, and we found you, and you said, I'm excited about my new product, guys, because fitness is all about the feet, and that inspired us to want to have a great conversation, and it led to this one. Why is fitness all about the feet, Mark?
Well, when you think about it, we're humans. We're bipedal. We're very unique in the animal kingdom because we operate on 2 feet. Those 2 feet are our main points of contact with the ground. Those feet are what allow us to walk and run and jump and squat and set up a golf stroke or a tennis stroke or hit a baseball. Everything we do as an athlete certainly involves the feet. Everything we do as a human ought to involve the feet in terms of mobility, right? And if look, I've been a leader in the longevity field for the last 30 years, and I talk about 2 major quality of life categories that kind of define longevity. One of them is access to consciousness, right? Can we remember things? Can we interact with people? There's a lot of dementia that we have to sort of acknowledge exists in the world these days, and that's a quality of life issue that I want to spend some of my life combating. I want access to memories. I want to be cognizant of what's going on at all times around me, right? So there's a cognition, but then there's no mobility part of it. And without the mobility part, without the ability to walk, without the ability to go next door and visit your neighbors, or walk down the street, or walk to down the gates to an airplane to get on a plane and fly to another country and do a walking tour of that country, without that ability to move, life loses a lot of its quality. And that's one of the issues that happens with people as they get older. The first thing that goes is that mobility, right? They become wheelchair bound, they become house bound, they become sofa bound. And the idea that we have control over that it's this contact with the ground, our feet, that kind of determine the first kind of level of defense against that loss of mobility. Everything we do requires that we have some feedback from the surface that we're standing on. So we're born barefoot, okay? Acknowledge that we evolved 2.5 million years as humans barefoot. Our feet are infused with hundreds of thousands of nerve endings that are supposed to tell our brain every second the temperature, the texture, the tilt of the ground that we're walking on, and to allow the feet to respond first with grabbing the soil or grabbing the rock or whatever it is, or scrunching the arch or bending the toes. But that haptic information feeds the brain, and the brain says, okay, now with this person's perfect biomechanics, because everyone is born with perfect biomechanics, provided you have that ground feel, that input into the bottoms of the feet, now the brain can orchestrate exactly how to roll the ankle maybe a little bit, dorsiflex the foot, bend the knee, tilt the hip, to unload and to take that stride and to begin that process of walking or running or jumping or sprinting or whatever it is. So everything starts with the feet, with the contact with the ground. And as you lose contact with the ground, as your feet become immobile from atrophy, from not having used them, as we're going to talk about today, as they become dysfunctional and malformed because of the shoes that we choose to wear, by scrunching that big toe over against the rest of the toes, by turning that little toe into a vestigial organ that may shrivel up and fall off one day, by causing, plantar fasciitis or Achilles problems, or shortening the calf because the heel is raised too high. Our feet start to atrophy. And then as the feet atrophy, the rest of the kinetic chain, all the way up through the legs, through the hips to the neck, starts to become involved or disinvolved and atrophy as well. And so we lose mobility. So back to this original statement, everything starts with foot health, with your contact with the ground.
Mark, hey, Scott, I'm going to interrupt you, Scott. Okay. I wrote down 5 things as he was talking, but go ahead and go.
I was just going to say, Mark, I think that you touched on it. We're born barefoot. We have perfect form walking or whatever once we start walking. There's a couple, I think, an external source. Sorry about the balloons there. An external source that deteriorates that function, that foot feel function. But is there also an age related deterioration? As we get older, do we lose that proprioception?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And I'm going to say we do not. What we lose is we lose the joie de vivre. We lose the joy in movement. We lose the joy in getting up and walking around and working out and jumping rope and hiking over mixed terrain. We lose. So as we age, we don't really, there's not a obligatory decline in proprioception as we age. What happens is there's an effect from not working out, from not walking, from wearing crappy shoes all the time, from bypassing all that important haptic sensory input that our feet require. And over time, we see people become decrepit. But it's not a genetic mandate. It is the effect of a lifestyle. And when I say that people are born with perfect biomechanics, people are born, look, obviously birth defects aside, people are born with perfect arches and with perfect toe lengths. And it's perfect for your own particular gene set, provided your brain has all the information it requires to orchestrate that kinetic chain that you own from the bottoms of the feet to the top of your head. Now, what I mean by that is you could say, well, I was born with flat feet. I don't have any arches. Well, you might have been born with what looks like flat arches, but that musculature works perfectly well. And as long as you work it for your entire life, as long as you spend a lot of time going barefoot, as long as you do foot exercises, as long as you wear minimalist footwear when you're wearing shoes, that flatness does not impede your ability to spring, to bounce, to walk, to do all the things that feet are required to do. You would say, well, but I'm duck-footed. I walk, with my toes pointed outward. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Maybe you walk with your toes pointed outward because you've been scrunching your big toe over so far that your body has had to compensate from the lack of information from the ground feel and from scrunching the toes together, so that your brain says, I don't have much information to work with, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to point the feet outward and I'm going to overpronate when I walk forward, and I'm going to bow the knees in, and that's how I'm going to move from point A to point B. That's not your most efficient biomechanics, but it's your brain operating with the limited information that it has because you have deprived it of the sensory input and the strengthening of the feet. So people could say, well, I have wide hips, I'm not knee. All of this stuff doesn't matter if the brain has access to the information, the input, the texture, the tilt, the temperature of the ground that you're walking on, so that it can look. Every time you weight that front foot, by the time you put half your body weight on the foot, the brain already knows exactly whether or not to roll the ankle out a little bit. Maybe the roadway is tilted or you're stepping on a rock. It's fine to roll your ankle is a universal joint. It works in all directions. The knee is not, right? The knee is basically planar. So the way that the ankle can roll to offset some of what may be, an unstable positioning is built into the system. But if you put on a stiff, let's say you put on a stiff hiking boot, you go for a hike, but you're stepping on all kinds of sideways rocks and things. So many people like whack their knees doing that because, again, the foot has not only no input into the sensory part of this, but the foot has also been immobilized. So the first point of stress is from the ankle or up to the knee, which is why so many people maybe twist a knee or rotate an ankle when they're hiking, not because because they made a mistake, but because the brain did not have the sensory input to orchestrate the entire foot movement.
Mark,
does that make sense? It's
yes, yeah. I mean, I've got a page now full of thoughts here. I want to, and you're absolutely right. Of course, as you're speaking to this, it just rings and resonates true that your body relies on that first bit of sensory information. So up that kinetic chain, all the way through the shin, the knee, the hip, the low back, the torso, all the way up to the brain. It's getting information so it knows what muscle to turn off, what muscle to turn on to create stability, that you all end up with a gait with a lot of dysfunction because it doesn't have that information. It needs, if you want good gait, you have to start with the very beginning, garbage in, garbage out. You've got to have great proprioceptive feel if you want great gait. You can't have one without the other. That's what I think.
Absolutely, and that's absolutely true. Yeah.
So do I still have a little bit of the time? I've got seven things. I've got seven things.
Expound on that, but you have this list on. Let's get.
No, I've got seven things. Yeah. So one of my first thoughts as you were speaking, I'm thinking about running as we're a running podcast, and I thought, as the feet go, your race goes. So many times, somebody will sit down, they'll be working on blister, or they'll just have foot pain, or maybe it leads to a cramp because you're not getting the body mechanics that you need. Who knows? But the feet, a very important part of a race, and that's why you need that good information coming in, and so you can take care of it.
Right. So that's a great example. I mean, I would say that so much of the elite, racing, from sprinters all the way up through ultra runners, does depend on strong feet, strong arches, strong Achilles tendon. I mean, the Achilles is an incredible device that we spring load every time we run, if we run appropriately, right? If you're a heel striker, then it becomes an entirely different biomechanics, and that comes with its own set of drawbacks. But if you're an elite racer, you've developed this connection, this spring loading coil effect, where your feet are striking the ground preloaded, and the bounce effect that you have when you land, you're spending minimal time on the ground. The Achilles, the calf isn't really doing much. It's all just tight and straight and stiff and loaded, and it becomes a spring that you just bounce off of. If you're a citizen runner and you've taken up running maybe late in life, and you've not learned how to run appropriately, which was, I think, first really kind of detailed by Chris McDougall in Born to Run. If you have not learned how to absorb some of the shock with your feet, then you rely on thick shoes to cushion, if you will, the blow of the feet landing. And then you're not using your feet. Now you're sort of relying on cushioning in your shoes, and that can lead to all manner of upstream kinetic chain injuries, whether it's plantar fasciitis, whether it's Achilles tendinosis, strained calf muscles, quads that are wonky. An example I would give you is I was a decent runner in my day, and
hang on. Let's pause there for a minute. We need to define what decent runner is. I have some of the qualifications that Mark so humbly says decent runner. February 1982 Ironman World Championships. He finished fourth. In the 1970s, he was a part of the Portland Track Club. He finished top 5 in the 1980 U.S. National Marathon Championships, and he qualified for a spot in the U.S. Olympics in 1980. He was a little bit better than a decent runner. So I just wanted to interrupt you there. Sorry, Mark.
So not decent runners like you and I, Scott. Not how we describe ourselves. Okay, go ahead, Mark.
No, but I I first got interested in foot health and biomechanics because I got injured. I was a 100-mile-a-week runner. I was an early adopter of the Nike thick, soled training shoes, and I upped my mileage from 50, 60 miles a week in Onitsuka Tigers, these were minimalist shoes. The Tigers were minimalist shoes, and they literally limited how many miles you could run a week because it was your feet or your calves or your Achilles. It would tell you that's enough miles for this week. Let's stop. Then along comes Bowerman and Phil Knight, and they say we want our Oregon Track Club to run more miles to keep up with the Europeans, and so they developed these thick shoes, which were great for a while. Except I developed a horrible case of chondromalacia, knee problems, because of the wobbliness over 100 miles a week of running. Now, I was a miracle cure with orthotics. Steve Subotnik, 1974 or 75 in Hayward, California, came up with these hard acrylic orthotics that kept me. They prevented me from pronating, which is what runners are supposed to do. Runners are supposed to pronate. Elite runners are anyway. But the orthotics sort of kept my feet tilted to the outside, and my knee pain went away. 3 years later, I developed hip tendonitis because all I did was bypass the problem, which was the shoes were too thick. And so how do we fix the thick shoe problem? We put orthotics in, and that fixes the knee problem. But then it just
cascades.
It cascades up the kinetic chain to the hips, and basically everything stops with the hips at that point. So I wound up having to retire from competition in 1980 as a result of what I would say was incurable hip tendonitis, which I didn't even stayed with me for another 30 years until I figured out how to get rid of that. But and how I figured out how to get rid of it was by not running for a long time. The point is that we have these. So we want to run. People say I want to run. I'm compelled to run. And so I want to run comfortably, and I want to run in cushioned shoes because I don't like the impact. If you have people run barefoot in their heel strikers, they won't be able to run at all. They automatically have to kind of run with a good stride. So that all of this got me interested in how do we regain foot health to the extent that we can walk and be mobile for the rest of our lives, that we can do the sports that we want to play for the rest of our lives, that we can run occasionally for the rest of our lives. And when I say run occasionally, my new book, which comes out in September, is called Born to Walk. And it's literally, if it's sort of an indictment of the running boom as having been largely inappropriate for most people. Like most people should not be running as much as they're running. They should be walking a lot, strengthening their feet, and they should be running maybe a little bit. And so what I would say is we're born to be able to run, but we're not born to run every day metronomically 7-8 minute miles, right? We're born to be able to run, and that's a good thing. But I'd rather give runners permission to walk a lot more. Walk with minimalist footwear on, walk with a backpack or a weight vest, do off-road, gnarly, aggressive trail hiking, strengthen your feet that way. And then when it's time to put on your running shoes, your feet will thank you for it. Your feet will be stronger for having done that. They'll be more resilient. They'll be less inclined to sprain an ankle when you step on a rock the wrong way and things like that. One of the things I was going to mention about the proprioception was one good test of that is if you run barefoot across, say, a football field that's got gopher holes in it, you won't sprain your ankle, because by the time you put your weight on that foot that's stepping on a gopher hole, by the time you weight it, the brain already has all that information about, okay, I'm going to roll the ankle a little bit more now. I'm going to even, give a partial stumble just to recover from this. But if you're running across that field with cleats on that are an inch off the ground and are stiff and immobilizing the rest of your feet, so your arch can't even absorb some of the impact, yeah, you'll sprain an ankle, or you'll maybe roll it a little bit. But the experiment that you can do barefoot is pretty interesting. It's like if you walk, at night, if you walk across a carpet with your kids' Legos on it, you'll know exactly how to land, because by the time you put the foot down, the brain will know where that damn Lego is underneath the foot, right? Yeah. So if people could just get this, like I have this shoe company, Peluva, and our whole thing is ground feel. We want you to feel the ground, to the extent that we talk about foot candy. So like cobblestones, foot candy, right? We look for uneven surfaces to walk on. We look for the bumps on the metal plates in the road to stand on and feel every one. It's just like a whole new outlook on what's going on when you walk, rather than blindly accepting that binding your feet up in a thick, padded, cushioned shoe with a raised heel is somehow good for you or somehow pleasurable.
And it's illogical. Why would we put our foot inside something where we can't feel probably the number one most important piece of information that's coming through to help stabilize the rest of the body? We decide to shut that down and we just wrap it up. It doesn't make sense.
It does not make sense, and it's unconscionable to me that, for instance, the athletic training community doesn't seize this as an area of immense opportunity for strengthening athletes. We have one of the top athletes in the NFL. I can't say his name because he buys our shoes, but he trains in the off season, and he's known for the best footwork in the business. Trains in the off season in Peluvas. He's able to use the ground and train his feet. And by the way, when you wear minimalist shoes, and hopefully if you wear them with individual toes, every step you take walking is strengthening the muscles of the feet, the arch, the hallucis, the big toe muscles. Every muscle within the foot is getting strengthened, but in a very comfortable, non-loaded, non-ballistic way. When you run in minimalist footwear, now you're loading, and now you're maybe possibly, if you haven't trained for this, you may be courting some, pains, aches and pains, or injury. You have to train either barefoot or in minimalist footwear very carefully. But when you do, and if all you do is walk, then every step you take is, it's going to make you more resilient, more resistant to injury, and more likely that when you throw on your running shoes and go for a run, again, your feet will be stronger. You might even be faster as a result of it. We have a lot of these. I was telling Scott before the show, we have a number of ultra trail runners, guys who do 30 miles, 50 miles, 100 miles off-road racing, and they train in Peluvas. They train in my shoes with, one guy trains with 60 pounds, but some of these they train with weight vests on, or they're rucking. That's the term. They're rucking on uneven surfaces, hiking fast. They're not running, they're hiking, but every step they take, they're loading their feet and they're strengthening their feet, and the feet are feeling the ground underneath and responding appropriately by, again, rolling the ankle a little bit, bending the knee appropriately, doing all the things that feet are supposed to do given the proper sensory input. And these guys this is like so much of their training now is not getting injured, as you said earlier. It's not like ultra runners have real issues with feet. That's I think the major reason for dropping out of races or not entering races is foot problems. So now if we can build a more resilient foot, look, when you're an ultra runner, you're not doing high intensity interval. You're not running 200s at the track, right? You're pacing yourself to be fast walking, easy jogging, comfortable jogging, but always with an eye toward not getting injured in the process.
Hey, Mark, real quick, you've mentioned Peluva 2 or 3 times. Tell us a little bit about Peluva. And it's obviously, if you've been paying attention, it's a shoe company that you started. What makes it unique? What is Peluva?
So Peluva is a shoe company I started 3 years ago with my son. We launched our first product about a year ago. It was the intention here was to redesign footwear literally from the ground up. I mean, we learned a lot from the early days of Tiger, the Onitsukas. We learned learned what not to do from the thick shoes of the last 10 years. We took a lot from what I would call minimalist 1.0. I was an early adopter of the first 5-toed shoe. I was a big fan, but I felt that it didn't provide enough padding to be feasible to wear all the time or for every activity that you could engage in. I didn't think the uppers were that attractive. I didn't think there was enough lateral torsion support in the toes. So so we designed a shoe that is minimalist in its wide, thin, flat, flexible. It's got 5 individually articulated toe boxes. So we feel that in addition to ground feel, and while this looks like it's a regular shoe on the outside, it's still only 9 millimeters in stack height. The heel is only 9 millimeters off the ground. The metatarsal heads are only 9 mil off the ground, and then they taper down a little bit to allow the toes to individually respond to changes in the texture of the surface. The idea was let's marry the two concepts of protection and ground feel. Like if we can find that part of the Venn diagram where we've got enough protection that you can walk for 12 miles on concrete all day long and not suffer the consequences of bone bruising or metatarsal issues or whatever. But you have enough ground feel that every time you step on a crack on a sidewalk, you feel it and it feels good and you respond to it and you know what's happening. So that was and I think we hit really the exact sweet spot there. It's 3 millimeters of hard rubber. By the way, the outsole is strategically placed at wear points, and that's the only outsole we have. The rest is this midsole. The white part that you see is the midsole. About 5 to 6 millimeters total of thin, soft durometer EVA cushioning. That's what kind of defines what I would say the optimal marrying of ground feel and protection. Most minimal shoes, where they have a single toe box, they're wide. By the way, many of them are becoming less and less wide as they sort of cater to the fashion interests of your foot looks like your shoe looks like a clown shoe. Can you make it a little bit narrower and a little bit narrower? And so I see a lot of these minimal shoes now becoming narrower and narrower and kind of losing the reason they existed in the first place. But if you have malformed feet from years of wearing regular shoes, whether they're street shoes or fashion wear or high heels if you're a woman, or Tods or most running shoes, when you take your shoes off, your toes don't automatically seek this natural wide splay. Your toes are still messed up, which is why 20 million pairs of toe spacers have been sold in the last couple of years, right? People get that when they take their shoes off, their feet are still messed up. So if you put messed up feet in a wide toe box shoe, that's not enough, right? They won't seek some ideal splay. And believe me, your feet want to splay. Every time you roll off, you plant your heel on a walk and then you roll off the big toe, the foot wants to splay outwardly. If you've ever watched your footprint in the wet sand at the beach, or if you've sprinted in the wet sand at the beach, the maximum splay, because the feet want to splay outwardly. We allow that with Peluva. With most shoes, even if you have a wide-ish toe box, even if you're like a regular, one of the big, either a Nike or a New Balance or a Brooks or whatever, and you have a triple E width at the metatarsal, it still comes together at the front. It still squishes the big toe inward. And the foot does not want to do that. The foot says, I want to, the foot is V-shaped, right? The heel's down here and then the little toe out here and the big toe here. It's supposed to be V-shaped. So the idea behind Peluva was, how do we make the optimal footwear that allows people to relax, realign, and strengthen their feet over time? Now, can you do sports in Peluva? Absolutely. We have people playing pickleball in Peluvas. We have people playing, I've been playing, ultimate Frisbee in them since day one. We're making more sports-specific shoes, but for right now, we just say spend as much time as you can walking, spending your day in Peluvas, at the gym, any kind of leg day you're doing, wear them, get the full maximum ground feel and splay. And then, when it's time to play soccer, put on your soccer cleats and put on your basketball shoes or whatever, and put on your sports-specific shoes, and your feet will thank you for having done that.
It's like cross training for your feet.
Absolutely.
You may not be
Right.
out there getting it done. And you talked about the foot as a V, and your feet should splay. And one nice thing about the Peluvas, because I love them. I'm going to just tell you right now, I love wearing these shoes, and my first choice because they're that comfortable. Because each toe has a home. It goes into its spot, and it's not being pushed into a confinement, into a space. And makes me think about, our bunions, in your opinion, are bunions where the first metatarsal, the big toe, where you end up with a large growth outside on the outside of the foot and the big toe pointing inwards. Is that something genetic, do you think? Or do you think it's something that we have created because the front of the shoe narrows and that's just the state of the union?
Well, I would say that, almost all indigenous populations that we look at, especially the more primitive ones around the world, bunions don't exist, right? A barefoot is supposed to be V-shaped. Bunions, I would say, are not genetic. And I really have to rail against this because so many people say, well, Mark, I would love to wear your shoes, but I have bunions. And I said, well, we have a lot of people wearing bunions who are now walking pain-free because they've taken that big toe and started to realign it. I've had other people who have had bunion surgery who say, wish I'd never gotten the surgery on the one foot because my other foot feels great now. And I mean, I can't make a medical claim about curing bunions,
Sure.
but I can say that if the classic line is like, well, bunions run in my family. It's genetic. My grandmother had bunions and my mother had bunions. And then
They wore shoes too.
They wore tight shoes. And yes, there can be a predisposition. You can have, I spent 30 years in the nutrition field, talking about ways in which we can enhance bone density and ways in which we can, improve cardiovascular health by changing our diets. People would come to me and say, but Mark, heart attacks run in my family. My father had a heart attack. My uncle had a heart attack. I'm doomed to have a heart attack. And I'm like, no, you're not. You're doomed. You're not doomed, but you, more than maybe someone else, needs to pay attention to what you eat. And if you do pay attention, it's quite likely you won't have a heart attack. The fact you have a predisposition in your family kind of gives you a little bit of a red flag that you, more than most people, have to pay attention. But same with the bunion thing is like if you looked at the history of the people who have bunions and the footwear that they've chosen, you'd go, oh my God, it's like, no wonder you have a bunion. Like maybe your bone density would have been so resistant that it wouldn't have happened in your 20s and it would have happened in your 30s or 40s. But eventually you probably would have gotten one if you continue to wear that kind of footwear. And of course, we see it most with women. The high heel, the women's feet are shaped like a diamond pointed in the front. I mean, it's, and God bless women. I mean, don't stop wearing the heels, but train your feet accordingly. And my next door neighbor, who walks 5 to 8 miles a day every day, she's 67. Like,
Wow.
Like the kind of bunions, like, oh my God, like, okay, I'll let you try my shoes on, but just don't let me see you putting them on. I'm kidding. I helped her put them on, but she walks pain-free every day. She would not walk without Peluvas. She's like, this is the only shoe I can walk in. And it's because the big toe is so critical to a appropriate gait, a stride. And in physical therapy and in podiatric medicine, certainly in sports orthopedics, everybody knows the big toe is connected to the glute. You need the big toe to be able to work and activate in order to fire the glute fully. And if you scrunch that big toe over again and you rocker it up a little bit inside of a tight running shoe that's now got, again, an inch of or more of padding underneath, you can't even fire the glute. So then you wonder why you have issues with your lower back because you can't use your glute. And so the lower back says, okay, I got to adjust for this lack of information and this lack of engagement of the big toe. Again, if you understand the kinetic chain and how we're designed, you would be like me, pulling your hair out, going, how does the rest of the world not understand that foot health is like so complementary to everything else you do in terms of trying to achieve better health? I mean, you got to get your diet right. You got to exercise, but you can't exercise unless you get your feet right. As I tell people, foot health is the new sleep. right? Sleep was the big thing for the last 5 years. Get your sleep dialed in. My mission is like, okay, foot health, get your foot health dialed in, because that's really what's going to determine longevity almost more than anything. Look, the day we stop moving is the day we start dying. Really, I mean, that's, if you look at any older population, the minute you stop walking and you sit wheelchair bound or bed bound or sofa bound or whatever, that's a slippery slope to the end, which includes not just loss of muscle mass, which is huge in that issue, but loss of bone density, loss of balance. And so now you're 80 years old, you get up in the middle of the night, and you trip over the cat, and you can't catch yourself because you don't have balance and you don't have strength. You fall, you break your hip because you didn't have the bone density to sustain a fall like that. You wind up in the hospital and you get pneumonia and you die. And it's literally, it's a script that so many millions of people follow at the end of their life.
Mark, so when I first started running, started a little later in life, I actually coincidentally started about the same time, a little bit before Christopher McDougall wrote Born to Run. And it was amazing to see this shift to minimal footwear, the Vibram 5 Fingers, barefoot running. I remember Don ran American River 50 miler, and he met a guy that ran probably 2/3 of it barefoot.
Mm-hmm.
And so everybody was like really into minimal footwear and all that. And then something happened and it shifted, and we went back to maximal footwear. And certain brands had the big clown shoes, the big thick clown EVO soles. Why did we shift? Was it were we misusing that minimal footwear and people were getting hurt or having issues, and then they decided, oh, that's not the right thing, I'm going to go to the cushion shoes again? And I think that we're trying to find a happy medium now. What's your opinion on all that?
Well, it's a great question. And much as the example I like to use is Adkins. So Adkins
Mhm.
sort of discovered keto,
Mhm.
and he had the science right. He had the concept. Everything about it was perfect, except the execution was horrible. And so the Adkins way of eating took off for a little bit and then tripped and failed miserably, and people went the exact opposite for 15 or 20 years, until 5 years ago keto reemerged now with new science and new execution. And now so many people are embracing a ketogenic diet as a strategy, a way of eating, as a tool in the toolbox, because they figured out that while the idea was right, spot on, the execution was poor. I think that's what happened with minimalist footwear. I think the original company, the the 5-toed shoe, was a great idea. I was an early adopter. I had 20 pair of them. I believed in the science. I believed in everything that they were doing. I just had a problem with their ability to keep up with the trends in the marketplace in terms of colors, in terms of upper the substantial or insubstantial uppers, and the thickness of the soles. There were a number of other shoes that came on the market at the same time, but a series of bad events happened. So many people went out and read Born to Run and immediately went, oh, I'm a runner. I'll go buy some of these minimal shoes and I'll run 7 miles the first day. And so a lot of people got injured.
Don Freeman.
No, a lot of people were assuming that their running technique was perfect for them, and it wasn't. They were, and I have a whole chapter dedicated to this in my book, Born to Walk, about how it was these thick running shoes, even before the really thick ones, that enabled runners with bad form to put in more miles and just get injured running more miles. But they were always going to get injured because they had bad form. So when Born to Run came out, a number of people who, let me backtrack and just say that when I started running in the 60s, no one ran, right? You were a geek. You were a weirdo if you ran. And so the only people who ran were people who couldn't play football, basketball, baseball, hockey. I was one of them. So you self-selected to become a runner. No fat people ran. It was like, why would you do that? So the first 10 years of the running boom was thin, genetically selected people who could run without discomfort, who could generally run with a decent stride. An example of that would be last year, the average marathon finish time across the country, 1.5 million marathon experiences. The average finish time was 4 hours and 30 minutes, 10:38 a mile. In my book, that's not even running. Okay. But now when I ran a race in 1979, it was the Nike OTC marathon. There were 675 entrants. And the next to last finisher ran 4 hours and 30 minutes. So 99.9% of the field beat the average time of the last year's U.S. participant. But more to the point, I ran 221.38. No, 222. No, 221.38 in that race. I ran 221.38 in that race, 1979. What place did I get?
Wow.
What?
You should have won.
I know. I finished 48th.
Wow.
Wow.
And there were two foreigners in front of me, a Japanese guy and a New Zealand guy. The rest were American runners. So in those days, in that first phase of the running boom, it was mostly runners who were suited to running with good form. And, we got injured because of doing excess mileage, and I got injured because of, again, a lot of us got injured because of the excess miles from the footwear. So now, see, I digress so far. Don, what was the original question? But
the cycle of going from this minimalist trend to now maximal.
So now we get back to Born to Run, and there's a lot of runners who probably should not be running the number of miles that they're running, or certainly with the form that they're running, who are heel strikers, who've never been a midfoot striker, now run 5, 6, 7, 8 miles in 5 fingers their first time. So they got injured. So that was bad. A bad event number one. Bad event number two was the company Vibram got sued for false advertising, and it was a unscrupulous, litigious law firm that was just seeking a settlement. But the ownership of the company said, which is an Italian company, said, we don't want to fight the U.S. system. We'll settle and move on. Well, they're settling for almost $4 million. Made it look like they lost the case. And so now you have this bad series of events where great idea, again, back to the Adkins analogy, great idea, great science behind it. Tony Post, who was the CEO of the Five Finger Company at the time, told me years later, we would have won that lawsuit if we'd fought it because the science was there. Minimalist footwear does make your feet stronger. It is better for you. You just have to, like anything else. Like you wouldn't go to the gym and say, all right, I want stronger biceps. I think I'm going to curl, 150 pounds, 30 repetitions, 4 sets every day for the next year, right? You can't do that kind of stuff. So you have to ease into it. So at that point, now we're 2014, and on the scene comes Masai Basic Training and Hoka and a number of other of these thick shoes. And they're like, okay, we see an opening here. Like, not only are minimalist shoes not good for you, they're bad for you. So we're going to take the pendulum exactly in the opposite direction. And we're going to create Bosu balls that you can run on. And with the idea that by putting your foot on you're still working the muscles of your feet because the foot doesn't know where it's landing every time. It's squishing and rolling around. It was a horrible concept in my mind. But the public, which was the people who have the money, who vote with their dollars, said, geez, that sounds like a great idea. Give me thicker shoes. And of course, if you've ever worn these shoes, you go into a running shoe store and you try them on, and you jog down the aisle 22 feet and you turn around and jog back and go, this feels amazing. I'll take these. And it isn't until you put them on and walk for an hour in them and your low back hurts because of the lack of proprioception that you really understand, what exactly is going on here. So Um,
And Mark, really no surprise that they have super wide soles on them, because you need that to have some kind of balance. If you have
some kind of
zero proprioception, you better have some wide soles.
when I was in my, I don't know, 20s or 30s, there was a kangaroo shoes came out. They were like ski boots with springs on the bottom of them. You know, you could bounce around on them. And I tried a pair of these shoes on last time I was in a running shoe store, and I started laughing. I'm like, this is ludicrous. That this is what the running shoe industry has come to. Now, having said that, um, some of these shoes are, when used appropriately, are taking 4 minutes off the elite marathoners' finish times when used appropriately, and that's when somebody has trained their feet. Typically, it's a Rift Valley, East African who's ran to school barefoot every day for 15 years and then did barefoot drills and then puts these shoes on and runs 201. So the shoes do have, I think, some application, but by the same token, if you're a 4 hour and 30-minute finisher in the marathon, they probably take away some of your effectiveness. They probably make it more difficult to run than easier. We're starting to enter the running shoe space, and we're in 6 running shoe stores right now, and we're getting great traction with the idea that this is a training tool in your running arsenal. This is a shoe that you wear at the gym. You wear it if you're doing sprints, and in some context, you wear it all day around the house, because every step you take, as I say, you're strengthening your feet. You wear it on long walks, and it turns out that 85% of people going to a running shoe store to buy running shoes are actually walkers, right? It's not so much that running shoe stores are catering to just runners. There's a lot of walkers there, and of course, we would say Peluva is the absolute ideal walking shoe. Like, if you're going to walk in a minimalist shoe with full activation of all 5 toes and get that ground feel and redevelop that, you realign, strengthen, and relax your feet.
And
So
go ahead. One of our great friends, Bob Crowley, who's been on the show before, recently did a 200-mile endurance event and spent 90% of his time walking in preparation. And then he actually ran more of it than 90%. Of course, he did his normal routine of run walk as you would a 200-mile race, but the majority of his training was just walking as he was recovering from an injury and coming back. And so he is in the position of it's very effective. It's great fitness. You don't sacrifice from doing an efficient walk out there. And walking is new running is something he said, but not the name of the title. But he felt that and said, it's very helpful to get out there and just put the miles in on your feet.
Well, I'm seeing these world-class trail runners who are doing a lot of rucking. So they're being very conscientious about how they train. They're not just walking. They're walking with 20 or 30 pounds on, sometimes 40 or 50, with very specific. I mean, my friend Tom Hodge, he texts me every other day. I can't believe it. Like that. Well, I did 10 miles, rough terrain, covered 3,200 feet today with 60 pounds on. And he almost never runs as part of his training, and yet when he gets in the race, he runs. But many of these trail runs are fast hiking until you get to a flat part, in which case you run. But you don't need to train for that part of the race. You need to train for the fast hiking and for the foot resilience, and then you already know how to run. You're not going to just practice running long distances just so you can run the flat parts of these ultra races or the downhills. You want to develop the foot strength, you want to develop the resilience and mobility, and you want to do it with weight on in some cases, so that when you take that pack off, now you feel light as a feather when the finish line, when the starting gun goes off. So we're going to see a lot more people walking deliberately. I mean, I live in Miami Beach. It's flat here. I would rather, when I go to the south of France every summer for 2 months, and I do all kinds of rocky, the gnarliest stuff I can find, again, it's foot candy for me. I love it. Every time my foot lands differently, I get a smile on my face. I want that. I feel like I'm human. I feel like I'm working my feet out. When I'm in Miami, it's flat, flat, flat. So I put on a weight vest and I go out and I do another kind of workout where now I'm focused on the push off. I'm focused on rolling over the display and pushing off the big toe. And it becomes this part of my, it's like, okay, I'm doing, 10,000 repetitions of this kind of workout. They're all kind of specific to what I would call life training, right? When we talk about Born to Run and we talk about McDougall's book and persistence hunters, persistence hunting isn't running 7-minute miles for 2.5 hours in the heat of Africa, chasing a big animal. Persistence hunting is walking, sprinting, hiding, crouching, smelling, tracking, jogging, walking, sprinting for 2 hours. A friend of mine who's not in very good shape went on a persistence hunt with the Hadza a couple of weeks ago and did just fine keeping up with him, right? And here's one thing he said. He wore these desert boots, right? This is one of our it's a suede desert boot, and this is what he travels in. And he wore it on the safari, on the hunt. And he said the difference between the first time he was with the Hadza and this time was the first time they kept turning around going because of his shoes, because of his footfall. And this time they didn't. And I thought that was incredible. I thought that was a really cool, reporting back. So
hey, Mark.
So just to finish that thought. So persistence hunting, we were able to run, our ancestors were able to run because of life training, because of walking all day, squatting, sprinting, carrying things. And then when it came time to go hunt, we're trained for it. We don't need to it's Tuesday. We don't have a hunt today. Let's go run 10. It was like your life training trains you for that. So walking a lot and doing a little bit of dedicated rucking and carrying and stuff like that for a trail runner I'm going to say it's the best kind of training you could do because it's not as ballistic. You're not going to get injured for the most part. And it's I would say walking is anabolic. Running is catabolic. The more running you do, the more you tear down muscle.
Oh, wow. Wise.
So Mark, you've kind of gone through some of this, but I want to summarize. So if someone is listening to the episode and they're thinking, you know what, maybe I need to really work on my walking or my hiking, where do I start? Do I have to go out and buy a pair of Peluvas? Can I just put on a pair of socks and go to a nice smooth track that has a little bit of, where you're not going to injure your foot? How far should I go? I mean, Don and I made fun of Don, but I made the same mistake when these 5-finger shoes came out in the 2011, 2012 or whatever, where we put them on and we went for a 7-mile run, which was a mistake. Yeah. Where should we start? What advice would you give somebody that wants to follow your advice?
Right. So it depends on where you're coming from. Obviously, if you're a fit runner and you want to incorporate this into your lifestyle, into your training style, get a pair of Peluvas. Well, first of all, go barefoot as much as you can. Barefoot is always going to be number one. The reason, and in my life it is too, the reason we made Peluva was the real world says you can't emulate an ancestral lifestyle on concrete, pavement, hardwood floors, marble, and tile. The fat pads in the feet are not capable of accommodating that sort of surface for lengths of time, day in and day out. So that's why the idea behind the Peluva was I want to give you the sense when you're walking on a pavement, say on a sidewalk, I want to give you the feeling like you're walking barefoot on a putting green, right? So that's just the amount of little minimal cushion that we're looking at. So if you're a fit athlete, start by walking, 3, 4, 5 miles. I mean, I do 12, 14 miles a day when I'm in Europe. And I love it. It's like a different part of my psyche when I'm there. Partly because there's no gyms around, and I between walking and stand up paddling, I lose 4 pounds every year just from getting out there in nature and sweating and doing all the stuff that I do. If you're new to all of this, and you're okay with barefoot, and I think the first thing I tell people is go find a grassy area, take your shoes off, and just play, run, walk, whatever, barefoot a while, and notice how you smile. when your feet are contacting grass, you cannot not smile. It's like part of the psyche of that's the grounding effect, if you will, but it's also just the fact that the feet want to feel. They want to feel what's underneath, and grass feels good to the feet. So get that sensation, and then again, buy a pair of Peluvas. We have people start by, I'm just going to walk my dog. I'm going to put them on to walk my dog, and that's how I'll get used to it. And then eventually people say, well, now I'm doing long walks. I'm doing certainly. I made 15 of the women in my building buy Peluvas, and so I go to the gym every day, and they're always everybody's training in them. They love them for lunges and squats and weight days and treadmill days and stairmaster days and everything. I mean, it's really it applies to any time you need to use your feet to perform an activity. You're better off doing it barefoot, but the next best choice is in a minimalist 5-toed shoe. Yeah. So if you're, I would tell people don't run in these. I mean, I do, but you don't run in them because they're not designed for running. They're designed for walking and for living your life and strengthening your foot passively. We call it, passive training. All day long, you're training your toes. And then when it's time to run, put on your running shoes. Some people do choose to run in them, but those are people who are genetically gifted, who know how to run, who are forefoot or midfoot strikers, have trained a long time doing this. But short of that, these are I would just say walk as much as you're comfortable. First couple of times I tell people, look, if you think there's going to be an issue, put on a backpack because that's a little bit of your weight. Put your regular shoes in the backpack, walk, a mile or two.
Good point.
And if you feel some sort of discomfort, you don't like it, stop, put your regular shoes on and walk back. Until you get used to it. One of the things that people notice is the first couple of times they wear Peluvas, they'll say, well, I went out for a 3 or 4 mile walk. I have to tell you, my feet were sore or tired after I got back. And I'm like, okay, that's a good thing, because that means that's like telling me I went to the gym for the first time in, 3 months, and I did a weight workout, and now my muscles are sore. I'm like, okay, that's the point. So if your feet are not, a little bit of discomfort, a little bit of soreness, achiness is a good thing, because it means A, you haven't been working. Now we know you haven't been working your feet that much, and B, now we know that you are, and you'll start, and you'll build up, and you'll work into it. I mean, we tell people the toughest thing about the Peluvas is getting them on the first time, and we tell people, if your feet slide right into these shoes, you want these shoes.
Yeah.
If your feet don't slide right into these shoes, you want
these shoes.
You need these shoes.
Yeah.
You need
so,
them.
yeah. But what happens is over a very few number of wearings, people go from taking literally 5 or 6 minutes to put them on to get. This is the other thing is people put their toes in and they're like, I can't feel whether my toes are in. And so they have to use their fingers to feel if their toes are in. I'm like, okay, that's sign number one, that you have no proprioception. You have no haptic sensory input in your feet at all. You ought to know whether your toes are in or not. But anyway, so then they finally get them in and you walk around, and after a couple of wearings, they slide right in. Then your toes start to splay, and your toes splaying, is a very good thing. This is what you want. You want your toes to splay every time you push off the ground.
Okay, Mark, I've got a few cleanup questions here, because as you find out, I do write some things down during this episode, and when things come to mind, I write them down so I don't lose them. So you might hear a couple questions and go, I remember that part of the episode that Don would have asked that question had he had a chance. So here's one of them. The footfall comment that you made, the lack of noise of the persistent hunter, or the guy that went out and the year before, everybody asked him to be quiet, and now he's silent because you're more efficient, because you're landing in a way that your foot can hear what's going on with proprioception, and now not everybody else is hearing you clomp through the weeds and smacking the ground. So that's a real good sign of learning to listen to your own footfall out on the trail, out on a place, and see just how efficient am I by listening to your own footfall.
That's a very good observation. Now, you want me to elaborate on that, or you just, because I'll agree with you 100%, and I think you said it very concisely. Yeah.
Throw a sentence to back up anything, so it sounds like I knew what I was talking about. I'd welcome that.
It's absolutely true. I have nothing to add.
Oh, good. Now, you'll think about this one towards the beginning. And it was a runner that's standing there on the trail in a race or just out on a training run that says, yeah, I've got a knee problem. And it started making me think, well, it's not his knee at all. It started at his foot, and through the kinetic chain, the first thing to show up was his knee. So if you have knee pain, go to the base, go to the foundation and think, maybe it's my gait. Maybe it's how I'm landing.
Absolutely. And I think I think some people will identify with that and will agree with that, but then they won't change their footwear. And a thick cushion shoe with a stable base and a 4-foot motion control, rear foot stabilization, all the bells and whistles they throw in there. That's what's in many cases causing the knee issue, right? So like when you're injured from running, how do you recover? You walk, right? Walking is therapeutic for recovering from an injury. Right. And I would say that when you're recovering from an injury, walking barefoot, again, if you were to go to a grassy field and walk barefoot, that would be ideal. If that's not in the cards for you, then putting on minimalist footwear with big toe activation, with, in other words, the ability to articulate the toes individually, will retrain your kinetic chain. Your body will then understand exactly, again, how to orchestrate the requirements for stress control and for motion control based on the ground feel. And if it's flat, it's no problem. But if you start to walk on uneven surfaces, the good news is it's even better for your recovery, because now you're building up these intricate little musculature parts of your foot that you didn't activate before, that are taking the brunt of the initial force rather than bypassing it and sending it all up from the ankles to the knees to the hips. The foot should absorb 30% of the impact of everything you do. And
right.
I have a video on my phone I like to show people, but I went for a walk on a lava field. It was cooled lava. Okay, it was not lava. In Hawaii a couple of months ago, and it was a day where I wasn't going to do anything new. I wasn't going to work out. It was like I had a hard gym workout the day before, or a hard paddle, something like that. I'm like, I'm just going to go for a walk. I walked for 45 minutes on crusty, gnarly lava that every time my foot landed, it landed in a different place. It was one of the most incredible workouts I've ever done, and all I did was walk. And I didn't even walk fast. I walked slow, but I walked such that every time my foot landed, and sometimes it was like landing with at a 45-degree angle tilted forward. I had to accommodate, right? And because the Peluvas have very good traction, I wasn't concerned about slipping or anything like that. But every time I stepped on a rounded piece of lava, I could feel my foot grabbing it. And so the entire workout made me think, wow, so many people talk about going to the gym and like Monday is back and biceps, and Tuesday is chest and triceps. And I'm thinking, okay, what day is foot day for you, right? How come athletes don't have a specific foot day? Because it's so critical to what they do. If you've ever seen, some of these Messi's foot bound up in a soccer cleat, or Usain Bolt's feet, from having worn spikes his whole career, or LeBron James, notable for having the ugliest feet in the NBA. Obviously can't argue with the kind of success he's had, but I would say, what if your career lasts 3 more years because your feet don't fail you? Feet don't fail me now, right? So I think this whole foot health thing and being cognizant of every step you take being an opportunity to do something that benefits your kinetic chain. And if you're recovering from a knee injury, classic example, like every time I walk, every step I take walking in recovering from a knee issue should be making me one step better.
Right. So here's my next comment. And if you're wondering when this happened, the answer is now. So I'm thinking about, people buying the high stack shoe, lots of cushion. Instinctively or intuitively, they're looking for a shock absorber because their current shock absorber system is broken. It's not working. So they're thinking, I need something to help me with all this impact as I hit the ground with my foot. So since it's broken, I'll buy this very large stacked shoe to make it more comfortable. If their system was working, it's already there. Our body wasn't designed without a shock absorber when we're supposed to be on this planet on our feet with gravity. There's going to be a system in there. We can control our temperature, our blood sugar. We've got to be able to control our impact to our skeletal system. Of course it was there. But if it's broken, then we buy something with a huge stack so we can survive. That's the thought
Which
that
is
came.
which is why over the last 5 years the stacks have gotten even higher, and the cushioning's gotten even more so. It's like the manufacturers are listening to the customer who says your current shoe hurts me, and I wish it were more comfortable, and so they make an even more cushy shoe until they don't realize that what they're doing is they're just putting a Band-Aid on a problem. You got to go back and fix the original problem, which is your own intrinsic biomechanics has been compromised because you've removed the most important component, which is ground feel. Let's go back to sentence number 1 of this interview, which is ground feel is essential to engaging the entire kinetic chain. And once you bypass the ground feel, all manner of accommodation and duct tape and coat hangers start to come into play. And, then the body is, you're able to move, but you're able to move not pain-free, and with some, again, it just works its way up the kinetic chain. And it may be quad knee problems with some people, quad problems with others. Could be piriformis syndrome because your glute isn't firing, and now some of the stabilizer muscles are having to come into play to take over that. Could be lower back, could be neck pain, and I'm going to argue that so much of this is a result of improper biomechanics brought on by improper footwear. And we go back to one of the original statements. I don't want to tell people not to run, but we are born to walk, and the more we walk, the more we integrate that system. The more we walk with an appropriate gait, I should say, which means either barefoot or in some form of minimalist footwear, the more we spend time doing that, the more we reintegrate all of this sensory input into our brain. We reorganize the kinetic chain. We start to fix those issues that were, like, including, bunions. I mean, a bunion is, it's just an accommodation. It's just the toe trying to accommodate a closed system, and then you're trying to walk on it while you're scrunching the toe. I mean, imagine trying to do a handstand if you tape your hands together and try to do a handstand, right? You want to do it like that. Well, that's just what we're doing with feet.
So, Mark, when does the book, your new book, come out? Born to
Comes
Walk?
out in September. Yeah, Born to Walk comes out in September. Yeah.
Well,
Excellent. We need to make sure that we're on the. I'll put a reminder. Is what I'm trying to say. I'll put a reminder in my phone.
For sure.
And Mark, it would be great to get back with you after we get a chance to look at that book and talk about it, because I still have more questions on this page. Many questions, and some of them deal with walking and how gait changes when you're in a set of Peluvas versus running. There's got to be a change.
You've noticed that, Don, right? You've done.
No, I have. I've worn mine out. But I love them.
Yeah.
Hey, Mark, thanks for coming on. I think that it's really inspired me to get out and have a foot day.
Yeah.
I train 6 days a week, and one of those days should be focused on foot day, because it's that important. And I think that you've inspired me and motivated me to have a foot day. So thank you very much. If you want to learn more, you can go to peluva.com. Of course, these links will be in the show notes. Or one of the things that we just barely mentioned, but you can learn a lot more on primalkitchen.com. And of course, that'll be in the show notes. Mark, thanks for coming on and helping us understand how important foot feel, foot proprioception, and walking can be, and how it can make us better ultra runners and trail runners.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mark. Great conversation.
Go out and walk.
Mas.